Okay. Sam, let me know when I can go ahead and begin.
Okay, everybody ready? Go ahead, Donna.
Okay. Sounds good. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Donna, and I will be your host and your moderator for today's event. I hope all of you and your loved ones are doing fine at home. This week in Los Angeles, we actually broke record of having 1 million COVID-19 cases. So out of the safety concern, we are actually operating from my home, from the Lotus Seminar Room, as well as Australia. So please be patient if we experience any technical difficulties. We will do our best to make today's event as smooth as possible. So thank you so much for your understanding in advance. Today's webinar is Acupuncture Point Combinations Matter, Clinical Pearls for the 5 Spirits, Emotions, and Mental Wellbeing, Part 1. This course is being recorded and presented by Lotus Institute of Integrative Medicine. Here at eLotus, we have been holding educational seminars and webinars for over 2 decades now, and we are proud to be your trusted source for premium. I will be your host and your moderator. 120 speakers, 600 courses, and 3,000 hours of continuing education. So out of curiosity, how many of you are attending your very first eLotus webinar with us today? If you are, go ahead and type first into the chat room, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat room here. Oh, yay, there's new people. Welcome. It's so good to have you guys. I will be your host and your moderator for today's event. I hope all of you and your loved ones are doing into the chat room, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat room here. So it's a lot of firsts for all of us. Yay, there's new people. Okay, so welcome back to our returning students and hello to our new ones. Today, we are lucky to have with us David Hartmann joining us from Australia. This is the very first time, again, that we're hosting from California while the speaker is in another country. So please be kind if there are any technical issues. After all, we are still in a collective funk with the pandemic still very much happening. Although we wish we could have David physically here in LA, it is what it is, and the show must go on. So how many of you have taken a full course with David? In other words, he has never taken a full course with David. So in other words, he's a new speaker to you. If so, type new into the chat room. Wow, that's quite a bit. I'm so glad. David is a wonderful presenter. You're going to just love him. He is a licensed acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner from Brisbane, Australia, and has been practicing since 1997. And upgraded his qualifications with a master's in 2009. He is a contracted academic at Endeavour College of Natural Health, where he lectures students in the Bachelor of Chinese Medicine program, and is also a keen researcher and writer, and has recently written a textbook titled The Principles and Practical Application of Acupuncture Point Combinations. And you'll get a little taste of it in today's class, as well as tomorrow. So tomorrow is part 2, and today is part 1. So David has presented at conferences and seminars from all over the world. He has a wealth of knowledge in the field of Chinese medicine and is forever researching and learning new things. So today we have 3 groups with us today. Our first group is our Watch It Free group. You register for today's webinar using a coupon code to access today's live webinar for free. If you would like to earn CEUs or get the 4-week video replay, you can upgrade to our second group, which is our paid group, for $135. Paid Group 2 paid attendees receive CEUs and can rewatch the contents of today's class as many times as you like for 1 whole month. So that's 4 weeks of unlimited access. I will enter the link in the chat room on how to upgrade to the paid CEU group in a little bit once the class gets started. It was also in the reminder email if you want to go ahead and look at that as well. And finally, our last group, our third group. Our third group is our Gold Pass members. Gold Pass members have unlimited access to all of our online CEU courses of over 600 courses, 3,000 hours of video, and includes live webinars such as today's event. And you don't have to pay again. Gold Pass members can access any of our English courses for as long as you are a member, plus you receive special perks from our industry sponsors like Evergreen Herbs and Helio Medical Supplies. I'd also like to take this time to thank our Evergreen Herbs customers as well as Evergreen Herbs for sponsoring today's event for free, as well as for sponsoring today's event for free. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. When you choose Evergreen as your herb provider, you're also choosing to invest in the advancement of TCM and provide opportunities like today in which you and your colleagues can attend free educational courses that will fine-tune your skills. We share the same love for Chinese medicine like you and would like to see it benefit as many people as possible. So thank you so much for your support. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping topics. Today's webinar will run from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll have 4 short breaks, about 10 minutes each, and David will let you know when those breaks are. Our lunch break is from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And if you would like to send a chat, please be sure to set your chat to all panelists and attendees. Make sure to you'll need to select that because by default it goes to all panelists, and which means only the host, myself, and David and our tech would be able to see those comments. But we know that everyone wants to see everyone what everyone's saying. Otherwise, they're out of a loop. So when a question is asked, please again make sure you set your question to all panelists and attendees as well as all comments. That way, everyone is participating in the chat room. So that's a little thing about Zoom that everyone has to pay a little bit more attention to. And then if you are paid or Gold Pass attendees, as long as you're logged in for the day, you will get credit. You don't need to worry about that. And you'll also get, for paid, you'll get 4-week access of the video replay. For Gold Pass members, it's unlimited as long as you are a Gold Pass member. All right, so I guess that's it. If you guys have any additional questions, you are more than welcome to send me an email. I will be checking my email throughout the day. It's info@elotus.org, or that's the best way to send me an email because the chat room can go really fast. So it's the best way to contact me. So again, my email address is info@elotus.org. Without further ado, let's go ahead and give a big warm welcome to David. David, you can go ahead and take over.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so hopefully you've got my slide up there for you, full screen. I've got to share you a little.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I interject?
Yes.
You showing the I think next slide, like what's it called? The
it does that again, is it? Yep. Gotcha.
Not full screen right now.
How's that?
Perfect.
Right. Thank you, Sam. All right. I've got to share you this little story before I start. So it's some of you are probably aware it's 3 a.m. here. And so I've gone to bed last night at about 9 and set the alarm for 2. And then from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., I dreamt that I was teaching this class. Not sure if Donna is willing to pay me for that 5 hours of work that I did in my sleep. It was, this has probably all happened to some of you at some point. You know, I wake up, but I'm sleeping, and then I'm getting ready for this presentation, and then it's not at my house for some reason. It's at a university, and it's in a lecture room, and I need a code, and I've forgotten the code, and then I've run downstairs without all my gear, and I've called an Uber, and the Uber hasn't arrived, and I'm going to be late for Donna's presentation, and it's just this whole thing. And so that was, and then the alarm went off. So, the stress of it all. But anyway, I'm here and on time, and we will get into it. But our brains sometimes, they're funny things. Thank you so much for coming today. I was really excited to get this opportunity. As Donna alluded to, I was supposed to be there live, but COVID is obviously impacting on that at the moment, but still an opportunity for me to do this today with you. I haven't been able to navigate the lighting above my head all that well, so there's just, sorry about the shining on my glasses, but it'll actually be sun up soon enough, and I'll be able to turn off that light and we should be right. So anyway, we shall get into it. As the name indicates, the theme of the 2 days, overriding it all, is acupuncture point combinations. And so that is essentially constructed treatments. And it is targeting 5 spirits, which, as I'm sure most of you are aware, are things like the Hun, ethereal soul, the Shen, the Po, the grounded soul, etc. We're going to look at 9 emotions, not just the main 7, but a couple of extras, because even though the 7 original emotions are still relevant, there are a couple of glaring omissions, namely anxiety and depression. So we will spend some time on that. And in fact, we'll actually spend a good 30 minutes on depression because of the impact it has on our lives and the potential for what acupuncture can do in clinic in terms of the ability to treat successfully. And we're going to look at some mental well-being stuff as well, things like bipolar, schizophrenia, insomnia, poor memory, those types of things. So we'll get into those in just a moment. I will let you know what's happening with those in just a moment. So today, excuse me, we are going to look at pretty much, I guess, a little bit of an overview of the acupuncture point combinations. I don't want to have to keep saying that, so I'm going to start saying APC quite a bit, just to try to shorten that term. We're going to look at why it matters, how they work, treating the person, not the disease. If you were here a few days ago for the 1-hour talk, on that today. And then we'll look at 21 APCs, a range of different ones, modern, pre-modern, classical, those types of things. We'll look at the definition, we'll analyse them, look at treatments and case studies potentially as well. There's case studies, there's additional information that I've put into the slides that if we've got time for, we will spend it on, but I've got a fairly strict sort of plan through this. So if things do go to the side, they may be some of the case studies and extra content that I had planned. So Donna did sort of discuss this quickly. Currently, I'm actually not lecturing at Endeavour College anymore. I'm now the module leader for the Chinese Classics subject at the Northern College of Acupuncture in York in the UK for their masters, their online masters program. So this is a big thing for me. It's an amazing college and a great opportunity, and it gives me a chance to embrace that side of myself that I really love, the classics and the history of Chinese medicine and the history of China in general. I've been treating since 1997. I do have a special interest in treating motion-based conditions, which is why this, I guess, set of slides was built. Got a croaky throat. Excuse me, this always happens when I first start talking, but it'll clear up quickly. Donna also mentioned I've been presenting at conferences and doing my own workshops at over a dozen countries around the world, and once the world opens up again, I'll be getting back into that again as well. The topic we'll talk about more, so I don't really need to get into that too much right now. But I guess for me, it's important to, it's a concept that I believe really matters, and we'll get into the reasons for why that is shortly. And that leads into this workshop as well. So regarding the acupuncture point combinations of the APCs, the disclaimer here is that a lot of them are a set format. So 4 gates, for example, is liver 3, large intestine 4. So the point combination, that's the points. So when we get into these point combinations, there might not necessarily be too much moving off that space. But what I often like to do is tweak point combinations a little bit anyway, because I'm probably not going to just put those points in. I'm going to be putting more in, and we'll talk about those ideas a little bit more before we get into the actual point combinations. I think it's important that you understand across these 2 days the likely number of points you're going to see in the combinations so that it will make sense to you once we start to build them. And if you don't do those same number of points, that's completely fine. You take some away, you add some. It's about giving you something to work off, a platform, a blueprint, a base model that then you make your own flavor. So people will often say to me, "Same all the time." Well, that's because that's the combination. The TCM terminology definitions, again, if they look obvious, say when I start talking about the Hun and we start talking about the dreaming soul, this is all information that's not new. It's TCM terminology that you'll see when you study and you'll see in other books and places. If it's a specific thing I found in a text that I feel is relevant, I will reference it specifically. But otherwise, it's common TCM knowledge. Yep. And regarding the treatments, it aligns with those acupuncture point combinations. Sometimes they're specific. So if the point combination is just the combination, it will be listed as is. But this will make more sense as we go through them, okay? If they are adjusted slightly for a particular condition, then I will specify that fact with you as well. Because sometimes, like with Four Gates, you want to do more than just those points, and you want to do them for a specific reason, in which case you add more points to make it a specific treatment. And I'm also not treading on the toes of any other acupuncture treatment style. There's a place for everything. It doesn't matter whether you're a Master Tung, a Dr. Tan fan, whether you love the 6 divisions, whether you diagnose using Zhang Fu patterns, whether you diagnose using 5 elements. There's a place for everything, because the number of years that I've been traveling around and meeting all of you amazing people, I'm seeing that we can do different things and still get incredible results. And I think that that's probably one of the overriding problems we have with Western medicine and them embracing acupuncture, is that you don't do this to achieve this outcome. And so that can sometimes fry their brains, because often that's the way they're taught. This will mean this, you use this for this thing. Whereas we'll go, oh, we could do this, but we could also do this, or even this. And then sometimes we'll do this because of the way that they're feeling today, but we'll change it tomorrow. Whereas they'll probably have the same drug with the same intensity the whole time. So this is something we're probably going to always have problems with, getting that link between the two medicines. But if it's working for you, you go for it. This is the chance for you to learn something and perhaps tweak what you're currently doing. So this is a quote from just one of my favorite Chinese medicine practitioners ever. I call him Johnny Mac, but Dr. John McDonald, and he did a forward for me for my book. And I just want to read this for you here. There are 2 vital process steps with which I have seen many students struggle. The first is transforming a list of signs and symptoms and clinical observations into a traditional Chinese medicine pattern differentiation or other diagnostic conclusion. The second is constructing the most appropriate acupuncture point combination to address the specific health needs of the presenting patient. So what we're looking at there, of course, is that what he's seen, and he's been an acupuncturist since the late 70s. So he's been doing it a fair while. And that's the 2 things he's saying that students have the most problem with: diagnosing the patient and constructing a treatment, or an APC. And that's, for me, what I've noticed as well. Now, I've not been teaching anywhere near as long as him. I've only been teaching and lecturing students since 2000, which is still a very long time. I can't quite believe that. I still feel really young. But anyway, that's for a story another time. But that's what I've noticed as well, is those 2 concepts: diagnosing and constructing a treatment. And so what I thought was, even for people that have graduated, if I could teach them how to help them construct a treatment, regardless of whether they're a student or a practitioner, it can help enhance their overall benefits in clinic. So I don't believe there is just one answer, and it's a bit like what we've been talking about. It's really just that, for me, there's multiple ways that you can do something. And if you're getting the results, great. If you feel like you could be doing better, well, this is where something like this comes in handy. So it is designed to stretch your thinking about how to construct treatments. So you'll be getting some consolidation today and tomorrow, but I don't think that's a bad thing. As long as the whole day you're not just sitting there going, oh, duh, I know all this, Dave. Give me something new. I want you to be getting some information that consolidates your knowledge, your thinking, because sometimes no matter how long you've been doing something, it's always nice to just be affirmed that you're doing it right as well. So I'm hoping that you do come into the workshop with an open mind. I might challenge your views or be completely counter to them, but that's already, I've laid that seed anyway, in the sense that that's what Chinese medicine is. We are going to do things differently. I used the example a couple of days ago. I've got a friend in Israel and he uses one needle to treat each patient. It's a different point each time, but he believes you only need one needle, whereas I'll use between 8 to 16 needles. And then I've got some friends that use, up to 50. But we all potentially are getting good outcomes using that range of different numbers of needles. But even just the idea of what points we use could be counter to your views or challenge your views. Do a bit in my treatments because it's an exceptionally good point for regulating emotions. Now, it's a point that maybe half of you will argue with, because it seems to be a point you either love or you hate. And if you don't like it, don't use it. Either completely leave it out or add a point in that you do like to replace it. Examples of a do 20 that you might not use, what could you replace it with? You probably already worked that out, but something like a do 23, a do 24, yin tang, in and around where that do 20 is, would be perfectly acceptable. Other points or point combinations that you might be challenged with are things like the kidney spirit gate points. They are points that not everyone agrees with in regards to what they treat. The outer bladder points that treat the emotion, the 5 spirits, like Pohu, bladder 42. It has Po in the name, but does that mean that it treats the Po or the grounded soul? So we'll look at that more as well over the coming days. There are contradictions in TCM. This is what I love. I love the fact that we do have opposing ways that we do things, yet it still is an outcome that's positive to our patient. Some of the point combinations might seem simple or well-known, but again, you might get thrown a curve, or it'll be consolidating for you again. We do have to start with some of the more basic ones to progress into some of the more advanced ones. So if you're feeling like you are getting a bit of information that you don't feel is particularly advanced, stick in there, because we will get to some really interesting ones as we progress through the day. So an example of the one that might surprise you is the 4 gates. So we teach that one. So at Endeavour College, where I have taught for a long time in Brisbane, not currently, but where I have been, we teach the 4 gates probably in the first year of a 4-year course. But most students probably, when I've checked with them, they only really consider that it does about 3 or 4 things. Well, actually, it can treat over 10 different things, 10 different conditions, disorders, patterns. So again, this might surprise. And again, you might find that when you look at the 10, you go, well, it can't do this one if it can do this one. But again, it's this idea of contradictions or belief systems, really. And I think that it has the potential to do those 10 things, but it probably comes down to the APC you tag on to the 4 gates. If you want it to tonify chi and blood, then you add points like spleen 6, stomach 36, lung 9. If you want it to move stagnant chi and blood, then you would add pericardium 6, gallbladder 34, spleen 10, those types of points to enhance that aspect of it. So unpack that a little bit more as we progress through. So the goals are learning something new, definitely. Let's tick that box over the next day or two, depending on how long you are here with me for. Be reminded of something you had forgotten. This is almost better than learning something new. It's that little thing where there's this bit hidden away in the back of your brain somewhere, and then I'll say something and you'll go, "Stop it, Dave. I knew that." And it's like this light bulb moment that I adore that. It's a great feeling. And then, of course, reaffirm your own knowledge base. So be reminded of something you'd forgotten, but also reaffirming, consolidating the knowledge you already have. Now, I've got a few little questions just to get started. Some of you have already answered these ones. And this is going to be a bit of a process for me too, to look at the Q&A as we go through. I've you from Ireland. It's going to be late for you by the time this finishes. We had a couple from NZ, a few from Australia. You're up early as well. Thank you. I'm just excited to see that there's a lot of people from different places in the world. And I look forward to seeing you all once the world opens up again as well. Now, let me see the chat room. Yeah. I love it. Thank you. Heaps from Canada as well. How long then have you been doing practice for? 20 years in practice? 15 years? 19? Plenty of experience. 6 years, 20. First year in practice. Love it. Since 1998. Just, what's that, 22 years? Few months. Fantastic. Look at this. Lots of 20 plus. 5 years, 1999. I graduated in 1990, end of 1996. 22 years. Yeah. And there's a lot of newbies too. I love it. 1 year, 2 years, third year. Oh, third year student. Fantastic. And is it acupuncture specifically? Is it where you're from? Is it a Chinese herbal practice as well? Acu herbs. Herbs and acu, yep. 25 years. What am I? This is my 29th year from the year I started my course. In 41 years. Fantastic. I love it. Since 1997, exactly the same as me when I started. Acupuncture, herbs, massage. Oh, goodness. Okay. Love it. Herbs, acu, yep. Acu and herbs. In Australia, most of the bachelors, certainly the ones that I've taught at, they you only really get the patent herbs. You don't get taught how to do the herbal formulas from scratch. If you do a master's degree in Australia, then you have the potential to do that. You can prescribe raw herbs if you wanted to. From experience, though, a lot of Australians don't really like the idea of Chinese herbs, the raw ones, and having to cook them up, and the taste and the smell in the kitchen and ruining your pots and pans and all the rest of it. So we found that the patent herbs work quite well because you literally just hand them a pill and say, take this. It's not perfect because it might not be the perfect medication for them, but better than nothing, I guess, if they're going to at least take that. Yeah, granular herbs and things, that's right. Well, thank you for sharing. This is fantastic. Gives me more of a sense of where we're at. So thank you so much for that. And we'll hopefully get a chance to get a bit more information as we travel through. So bless you all for that. My kids taught me how to do Bitmojis. So you're going to get a bit of that throughout because you don't have to reference where you got those pictures from. All right. So what we're going to look at now is the following. So we're going to understand acupuncture point combinations a little bit more clearly before we look at them. So why does it matter? Looking at dynamic movement of vital substances, stagnations, etc. Stacking points, looking at local, adjacent, distal, and treating the person, not the disease. So again, I touched on this a couple of days ago if you're in that hour presentation, but a lot of you probably were not. So I just do need to make sure that we're aware of this. So acupuncture point combinations are sometimes structured points that are already listed the way that they are, but often what we want to do is tweak that slightly. And the reason that it matters to understand this is because patients are complex. They don't typically come in with a nice, easy diagnosis, whatever that diagnostic tool is that you use. So don't often fit into an easy diagnosis. So what do you do then? And that's why this 2 days, I feel, is important to really hopefully kick that, really make that something that you understand. And I know that if you've been doing acupuncture for as long as me or longer, you might already have that in your head, but I still don't think that we should discount the fact that we can always be better than we are. I don't think we should ever automatically assume that what we do is absolutely perfect. And patients surprise us. So what do you do, or how do you choose points when patients are complex? And that's why it matters. So for me, if a patient doesn't just come in with a nice, easy diagnosis, like say a fairly common pattern in Brisbane, in southeast Queensland, in Australia, is liver qi stagnation. It's very common. I remember reading Giovanni Macciaccia, and he said his most common pattern that he saw was spleen qi deficiency. Now, he worked in England and China, so obviously very different countries to Australia. And even Australia itself has got quite a lot of different climates attached to it. So depending on where you're from and where you live and how you diagnose, you're going to probably have one that happens more often than others. And liver qi stagnation is one of those ones that occurs a bit. And because it occurs a bit in Brisbane, and that's where I work, and because liver qi stagnation has emotional components to it, it's one of the, I think, reasons that I get so many emotion-based clients. So you can just construct a treatment with liver qi stagnation. That's pretty straightforward. The points that will pop into my head straight away, liver 3, it's called Tai Chong, great rushing. It moves the qi stagnation. It breaks that stagnation up. You've got Naguan, pericardium 6 is another good one. Gallbladder 34 is another good one to move through qi. But then what happens if they're not just liver qi stagnation? What happens if they have some other thing that's straddled with it? You know, maybe they've got a heart qi deficiency or a heart blood deficiency. Well, then what do you do? So, well, then you start probably thinking of heart 5, heart 6, heart 7, Ren 14, bladder 15, these types of points. Is that going to work? What points are you up to now? Do you have to sacrifice some points? Are all the points working well together? You know, that's the thing. I think most people, they learn point combinations from books and from what their teachers said, and they use them because they work. But then if things don't start working as well as they were expecting, maybe patients start to not get the results that they had been previously. And so then you start to go, well, I'm going to need to change this a bit. What do I do now? The vital thing for me is trying to get as many of the points in the combination working with one another. It's this idea that if more of them working well together as a team, then ultimately the less that you have to do. So does that make sense? It's like if you've got all these points doing their own things, they're kind of off on their own, but if they worked well as a team, that for me is what matters more. So sometimes a point will be left out that some students or when I talk to acupuncture friends, they'll go, why would you leave that one out? That's such an important point. I left it out because it didn't work well with the other points in the combination. It was a bit of a solo artist went off on its own and did a few things. And sometimes that might work, but what we want is a combination of points that work together as a unit. And for me, that's what's important. So dynamic movement of vital substances, again, just to remind you, of course, vital substances are qi, blood, body fluids, and essence or jing. They move at different speeds. They move in different parts of the body. I mean, essentially, they're all just a form of qi or a different form of qi, but they still move at different speeds. And they often accumulate in different locations. Some will be more heavily controlled by things like gravity. So body fluids are heavier, so they will have to fight against gravity a lot of the time. So that's important consideration. They move at different depths. And what substances are we activating with our point combination? So these are important considerations as well. It's all well and good to use liver 3 regularly for a lot of things that a patient has wrong with them, but is it always going to work as well? Because maybe it's not targeting the right vital substance for you. Now, moving vital substances, and some of this stuff isn't sounding very academic, but I think what we want to do, what I like doing is give you a visual. So I use words that are used every day, language. I try to use everyday language. So vital substances can flush the extremities, so clean out the extremities, move energy. So some vital substances are really good at moving energy out to the extremities, so down into the hands, down into the feet. Some point combinations are better at moving energy from the limbs back into the trunk. So points like gallbladder 34 are better at moving energy out from the trunk into the extremities, whereas points like stomach 36 are better at moving energy from the limbs back into the trunk. Large intestine 10, Shosunli is better at moving energy out into the limbs. So when you think about what that's doing, you need to think about what that's doing to the vital substances. If you move energy back to the trunk, that's where the vital substances are made. So that combination would be moving energy back to the trunk to make more. If you flush energy out into the extremities, including the head, you are moving the energy away from where it's made. When you move energy away from where it's made, it's getting burnt up. Like petrol in a car, what you call that in America, gas. If you just leave the car in the garage and never turn the car on, then the petrol's not going to be used up. But the minute you turn on the key and start driving the car, you start using it up. And that's the same with vital substances. You move it away from where it's made, you start to burn it up. So these are important considerations in terms of when you construct a point combination, what are you doing to the vital substances? So if someone, say, has kidney deficiency, and they have problems with their joints, maybe ankles and knees. And so you want to really target the ankles and the knees with your point combination. Well, then you need to be very, very careful that you don't move all the energy out into the extremities and the legs to make them feel better in the knees and the ankles, because you might make their kidney deficiency worse. So they might feel good in their knees and ankles for a couple of days, but then you drained that deficiency even more. So these are considerations as you're constructing your combination. So that applies then, are you wanting to nourish the organs? So flushing the extremities is moving energy out to the 2 arms, the 2 legs, and the head. Nourishing the organs is bringing the energy from the extremities back to the organs. The other thing to consider is that sometimes you want to sedate excesses. Sometimes you want to tonify deficiencies. Sometimes you want to break through a stagnation that's somewhere. Maybe someone's got a blown out osteoarthritis in their knee. And so that's all stagnant there. So you want to work your way through that stagnation, bash through it. Maybe you want to expel external pathogenic factors. These are all considerations when you're constructing APCs. So you can construct them for chi stag, blood stasis, body fluid accumulations, that's fine. The goal with it is to create the free flow of the chosen vital substance. If it's chi stag, I gave an example of that already. Liver 3, gallbladder 34, peri 6 are just 3 of many points you could use. Blood stasis, you're looking at points like spleen 10, bladder 17. There's so many choices. Often it depends on where the blood stasis is. So depending on where the blood stasis is, you might want to do spleen 4, you might want to do spleen 8, you might want to do lung 6. So because there's so many, you want to try and be target specific. Body fluid accumulations. Again, there's so many choices. Spleen 3, 6, 9, stomach 36, stomach 40. Again, so many choices. So once you know which of the vital substances are affected, then you need to try and work out where. Because if a person's got body fluid accumulations, if it's in the knee, then your combination will be very different to if it's, say, in the lower abdomen. I don't personally like stacking points in one area. I know a lot of you probably do, and that's completely fine. There's over 400 of you here, so this would be something that live we could have a lovely conversation about in the breaks. I don't personally like putting all the needles in one spot because you don't know what's happening in other places. And so say they've got the blown out knee that's all swollen and you put all your points below the knee. So from the toes up to the knee, you do all of these points. I'm getting croaky again, excuse me. Sorry about that. It's a logical one and it makes sense. If you've got everything below the knee, they've got to force their way through that stagnation in the knee. So you might say, well, Dave, I could put points in the knee. Totally. But what about points above the knee? Maybe on channels that move up the body. And so you could put a point like spleen 15 in, for example, to try to encourage the fluid up, just as one example. You've got spleen, liver, and kidney channels that travel up the leg, and they hook onto the Ren channel as well. So you could look at body fluid points on the Ren channel to encourage fluid up the legs. Maybe you haven't thought about using a point like Ren 5 or Ren 9. So Ren 9 is Shui Fen, water separator. Ren 5 is the front mu point of the Sanjiao, which regulates fire and water. Those 2 points can grab the fluid from the knee, which will be heavy, and gravity will be wanting to hold it down, and it will encourage the fluid back out of the knee, back up into the general circulation of the body to allow to clear it out of the leg. So that's an example of where I wouldn't want to stack needles in one spot, because you've got points further away that'll be very effective as well. Because we don't know where all the stagnations are, I like to have points sensibly scattered throughout the body. And so that often means I have points on the head or face or neck, the trunk, front or back, the arms or hands, and the legs or the feet. Now, not always all those locations, but certainly a range of those locations. So I look at local, adjacent, and distal points, essentially. And an example may not have any local points at all, but yet it's still very effective. So if that's what you use, great. But for me, I find that having something local works really well because it breaks the energy up where the stagnation is, and it works from the inside of the stagnation out. You have the distal points that work from the outside and come in, and then you have adjacent points that are in and around there working in harmony with both of those. So I use an example of that in my book where I talk about a cricket ball, we could say a baseball. It's very, very hard. You can't squash it. You can't break it up in your hand. But a donut, you can squash and break up in your hand. And the idea is that with the local points, because they work from the inside out, they create space in the middle. And then the outside ones come in and strip away the edges to make something that was a nice thick ball into something that's more like a halo or a donut with a hole in the middle of it. And then what happens is that can collapse in on itself and you get these really quick results, in my opinion. And I'm not just going off a few years. As I said, I have been studying and practicing acupuncture since 1993. So I'm working off a base. So that's the principle of how I construct my point combinations. Now, I won't always do local points. I might not always do distal points. I might not always do adjacent. It really depends on the patient at that exact point in time. Okay? And that's always important. You treat the person for that exact point in time when they come in. Now, here's an interesting one, because treating the person, not the disease, is a Chinese medicine concept that we use. But I've given you a quote from a Western philosophical medical dude. So Hippocrates is considered the almost the origins of Western medicine thinking. And he says, it is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. Now, if he is the father of Western medicine, and he says that, that's a rather interesting concept. Now, I know that Western medicine does a lot of good, and I'm so grateful that we have it in our world. But what I find interesting here is that Hippocrates has said something that sounds a bit more like Chinese medicine than what Western medicine is now. And what we want to make sure that we do is that we don't treat the disease and not the person. And we can do that if we give them a label, and then that's their label forevermore. You don't want a person coming in and you diagnose them as liver qi stagnation and they leave as that label, and then they go and tell everyone that they're liver qi stagnation. It might seem like the oddest thing, or that just wouldn't happen, Dave. But the reality is that if you go to a barbecue and meet new people, which probably isn't happening too much at the moment in our world, but if you meet new people, what are the things you often ask first? What's your name? What do you do for a living? Where you're from? That sort of thing. People that have disease labels that they consider to be important to them, it gets inserted into a new conversation very, very quickly. And so it's not out of the question that you meet someone and I go, hey, I'm Dave. And they go, oh, hi, I'm insomnia. It might not happen like that. They might go, oh, hey, I'm Christina. Oh, hey, Christina, how are you? Oh, let me tell you, Dave, I had the worst sleep. And, that's not a new thing because I have problems sleeping all the time, actually insomniac. Oh, right, okay, no worries. And look, this is an opening for us as acupuncturists and Chinese medicine practitioners. Have you ever tried acupuncture before? This is something that we don't want people to start to attach themselves to. We don't want them to attach themselves to their disease. The disease does not define who they are. Who they are as a person is what defines them as a person, not their disease. So this is important for us to obviously make sure we're okay with. I'm sure we are. And what are we going to look at now? We're going to look at more of the APCs. We're going to look at main complaints, accompanying signs and symptoms, Zhang Fu diagnosis, look for point combinations in all of that in regards to connections, sensible scattering of needles, 8 to 16 bilateral, that sort of thing. So I believe this will take us through to the first break, but there'll be some question and answer opportunities before that point. So the main complaint, that's the kick. So if, for example, I had that situation with a Christina meeting me at a barbecue and I say, hey, I'm Dave, and they say, hey, I'm insomnia, my brain instantly goes ping, 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 like little point combinations just pop up everywhere. Individual points first. So what points pop into my head for insomnia? Heart 7, Shen. Yin Tang, do 20. An Mien, the point at the back of the neck. An Mien, peaceful sleep. There's so many points that can pop into your head, but they're the ones that tend to pop in first. Then I start to think, okay, now we're looking at point combinations. Spleen 6 is really effective with Heart 7 and Yin Tang for insomnia. So then I might say to her, okay, insomnia, interesting. What type of insomnia do you have? And that's how it then blows out. But I'm jumping ahead of myself here. But that for me is what happens. No matter what complaint a person says, points start popping up in my head. These are not points I'll definitely use, but they are points that are there. And what's great is my brain seems to have the ability to store all those points. And then as new signs and symptoms emerge, the points kind of shift around in there and start to create little thought bubbles where little combinations start to align in different spots. So I might have one group of combination of points sitting over here in my brain. I mean, I know that's not what's happening, but just for the sake of you getting a sense visually of it, little combination over here and one here, and then every single word that they say and define it more, these combinations adjust. Oh, I've got an example of insomnia anyway. Headache, it would depend on where the headache was, but large intestine 4 is the best point for all types of headaches. Probably the other ones that'll pop into my head are small intestine 3 and bladder 60. So they're probably the first three that'll pop in my head. But then if they say where the headache is, that will define or refine the point combination a bit more. If they say, oh, it's around the side of my head and around my ear and behind one eye, I might start thinking gallbladder 14. I might start thinking gallbladder 41. If they say that the headache's at the top of the head, I might start thinking points like liver 3. At the back of the head, gallbladder 20. It really just depends on what they're saying. If they have problems with their headache and the neck, then small intestine 3 ticks a lot of boxes, so does lung 7. So this is what happens in my head. Now they start to add more. And that gives me more points I could use, as already discussed. It helps me refine my point list. So some points leave and some points stay. And new points can pop in. So if we've now got headache above one eye with stress, frustration, neck and shoulder tension, I'll probably ditch, well, no, I don't necessarily have to ditch bladder 60 because it treats neck and shoulders as well. But what I'm probably going to start to do is go, well, I'm going to maybe ditch bladder 60 because I want gallbladder 41. And I probably want liver 3 because of stress and frustration. And headache around an eye is liver gallbladder primarily. And I know liver 3 is going to be effective for that. Liver 3 also combines really well with gallbladder 41. I might consider if there's problems with their eyes in regards to tearing, or maybe they get little ticks or something like that, then I might include a gallbladder 15 with a gallbladder 41 because their head and foot overlooking tears, they regulate the moisture in the eyes, but they also treat headaches, they treat the eyes, etc. So it's these little combinations of things that start to happen in my head. And then my diagnostic set. Now for you, you might have a different way that you diagnose, but again, it shouldn't really change anything in regards to whatever diagnosis you use. It helps you to finalize the points. And for me, what that does is it takes my little thought bubbles and it takes away the ones that are least relevant and leaves one sitting there. So the same example of the headache above one eye with stress, frustration, neck and shoulder tension, then that might be their main sign or symptom of headache that gives me the diagnosis of liver qi stagnation. And so then again, the combination becomes a little bit more refined. So I think gallbladder 20 would probably have to be in there because it's going to treat the headache, it'll treat the stress, the frustration, it treats the neck and shoulder tension. We've got gallbladder 20 up high. I probably want a gallbladder point down low to get a link. So again, gallbladder 41. If the eyes are really affected, I might consider points like gallbladder 37 or 39, because they will treat the eyes as well. It really depends on a little bit more rounding out of the information. Peri 6 is probably going to be effective. I think large intestine 4 has got to stay for the headache, and it'll work well with liver 3 because that's opening the 4 gates and will help with the stress and frustration as well. So that's kind of what happens in my head. And then they're either face up or face down. I don't tend to. As a front move point. If they're face down, I might do bladder 18 as the back shoe point for liver. And then I look for point connections, and this is really probably a slide that's become unnecessary to really go through because I've kind of already talked about it. So it's really just looking at the points I'm choosing and making sure that they're linking the best that they can. And sometimes points might be left out. Spleen 6 is a very good point for liver qi stagnation, but it probably wasn't really the best choice based on the patient's signs and symptoms that were on the previous slide. So I'd leave it out. So it's about this communication of a point. Now, how do you know what points communicate with one another? Well, that's what this the next 2 days are doing. I also have it in my book, a lot more as well, but it's also about just sitting down and hitting the books. Get out your point prescription books. Look at what, not point prescription, books like, Peter Deadman's et al., where you look at each point and what they treat. Manual acupuncture is a terrific example of that. So you look up each point, you look at what they treat, and then you look up other points and you look for connections. There's lots of ways that you can go about that. Bob Floors has got some great books. Giovanni, I like Giovanni. I know sometimes people aren't massive fans of his, but I still think that he's fantastic with his books. Rest in peace, Giovanni. So good versus bad connections, we'll be really going through that, but just very quickly because I'm conscious of where we need to be with the slides. I just don't like stacking points in one place. So that's a bad connection. Good connections are points that are connected at distances, but also I like to make sure there isn't too much of a gap between where my needles are. I feel like it creates constant energy stimulation in the body. So I talked about the sensible scattering of needles. So that's not putting all the needles in one spot. Spread them out over the body, but be sensible about it as well. If you're just going, oh, David says put needles all over the body, and so just randomly stabbing the body in different spots, that's not what I'm saying. It's about choosing points that will link. And after, not sure if it's this first break or the second break, we start with the simple ones, but they create an understanding. So we look at yin and yang partnerships, yin-yin partnerships, yang-yang partnerships. These are sensible scattering of needles. And so I'll give some examples of that. I personally use between 8 and 16. I feel like anything less than 8, I haven't quite managed to get a combination of needles that is quite doing what I want, and too much more than 16, I'm potentially giving the body too much information or forcing too much on the body. If a person's really robust and they have a lot of things wrong with them and I think that their body can handle it, I might do more than 16. If I've got a frail person, young or old, I might do less than 8. It really just depends. And you'll find that with my combinations, that's what they're sitting in, between 8 to 16. So this will be your homework. If you use less than 8 or you use more than 16, then the combination will be setting the process of which you need to finish. You'll need to add points or take points away based on what you do. If you use between 8 to 16 like me, then you've got your blueprint and you can just go and use that exact combination. Or again, you might go, yeah, you know what? I really
prefer this point over this point, and I can't see any reason why that can't be subbed out. So do it. Take that point out, put your one in. And I'll give you my email address a little later. Be keen to get your thoughts on how that went. The thing I like about our community is that we stay as a community and we engage with one another. And so I'd love for us to be continuing dialogue after this workshop ends into the future as well. Talk about that. Bilateral needling, I like using bilateral needling. I feel like if there's two of them, you're going to get a better result than just using one. There was a semester where a guy, when I was working at Endeavour, if the student clinic was large enough, then there needed to be two supervisors. And there was a guy that's done acupuncture for longer than me, and he was a unilateral needler. And I do bilateral needling. And so we were the two co-supervisors for the clinic. And so the students would go and take their case history with the patient, then they'd come in and present to one of the two of us. So if they went to him, he would pick their point prescription, but encourage them to do unilateral. If they came to me one week, I'd be encouraging the bilateral needling. And it was interesting to watch that throughout the semester. The results from the students were still outstanding. So if you like unilateral needling, go for it. I get there's advantages because you can do so many more individual points, whereas if you do bilateral, technically every point counts as two needles. But for me, I feel like that is part of that connection, that you've got a point on each side that counts as almost a bit of a corresponding or mirror image type of thing. And I just feel like, yeah, if you've got two of it, then use both. That's personally what I do. So you'll have to change the combination slightly if you do unilateral, but not too much necessarily. And so to finish, as we head into the break, we've got these other ones. Now, it looks like a lot, but we'll be going through this quite quickly. Patient positioning. I do not flip my patients during treatments very often at all. I feel like they're getting relaxed right at the point where they're just about to drift off to have a little bit of a relax. I come back in and go, right, take the needles out, flip them over. The patient's brain starts kicking in again and they don't quite get back into that relaxed state again. I've just found that from experience, so I prefer not to flip. So you'll see face up and face down points regularly in the combinations. For me, I would choose typically one or the other in the treatment. I'm not giving you a list of point combinations throughout this next 2 days that are my favorites. I'm giving you a list of point combinations that are classical, pre-modern, modern, sometimes with a flip, something that a spin I'll put on it, but it's what's there. It's the information that's there, and then you decide how you want to play that out with your own personal preferences. So I will leave some points out because I don't flip. Or I will still do some points because you can. If they're face down, you can still do liver 3. You just put a bolster under their ankles, lift the leg up, put the needle in, drop it back down gently. You can do gallbladder 20 face up if you lay the needle transverse across and then just check, make sure they don't move their head around too much. But that's another way you can still get to some points. I had a workshop I did up in Cairns last year, which is right up the top of Queensland. It's the northeast part of Australia. And I did an 8 extraordinary vessels workshop. And we did the daimai, and there's a combination of the daimai which actually goes all around the trunk. And I've never done all of those needles before in one treatment if I don't flip a patient. They actually did. They lay them face up and they did some of the points on the back transverse and then lay back down on them and then it didn't move. It was an interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't really kind of considered that as a possibility, but that's an example of a group that did do it. What order to needle the points? I don't get too hung up on that. I do with 8 extraordinary vessels. I put the opening point in, then the couple and the remaining points in whatever order. But otherwise, I don't typically worry too much. What I do tend to do is leave the points that are more likely to hurt until the end. I did for a little while put them in first, like ripping a Band-Aid off, just get it done. And then you can relax. But I felt like the people didn't. If the first few hurt, then the patient kind of gets this expectation they're all going to hurt. So I tend to leave the ones that are more likely to hurt till the end. Which points are more likely to hurt? That's just clinical experience. I don't go into it expecting the needle to hurt. I go into it expecting the needle to slide in nicely, love and light and healing. But I am aware that some points just do hurt more on average. And that is often points on the face and points on the feet. And also just hygienically, I tend to leave those till the end anyway. Needle retention time, typically 20 to 40 minutes. Don't, again, get too hung up on that being a tonifying or sedating issue. I tend to find that patients get into a nice, relaxed state, but that it's not too much that they start laying there going, I need to get stuff done. Where's Dave? Take the needles out. I've got to go. So it's typically within that 20 to 40 minute space. Write your needle number down. Might seem really obvious, but you will never leave a needle in a patient ever again if you do that. So I'll put the needles in, count them, and then write the number and then circle it on the patient file. I'm still old school. I still write my patient files out by hand. It still works if you use computers. Just write the number down and then check the number as you're taking the needles out and count the needles. I do talk to the patient if they want to hear about it. And I feel like that really helps with the results because the patient starts visualizing what I'm explaining to them. What's that going to do? It's going to start actually helping the person to heal themselves. And it gives them a better sense of what's going on, which means that when they discuss it with friends and family, because it's going to happen, the minute people say to anyone else, oh, I went and had acupuncture. Oh, really? What is that? Doesn't that hurt? What does it do? How does it work? If they go, oh, I don't know, it's not really a great advertising point, short of them going, I don't know how it works, but it helped. But if they can at least explain it a bit, then I'm a fan of that. But for me, the minute they visualize what it is that I'm doing with the needles, their body starts to do, which helps the treatment. I expect results, so I expect the patient to improve, and I believe that this positive approach from me sets the chi in the room into a better space and also gives the patient a sense that I know what I'm doing and that I believe inherently in the medicine, which I do. My favorite channel, coincidentally, because this always comes up, is the Ren. I believe that you can do more with this channel than any other. And what's good about this particular channel is it's a needle saver because it's only 1 point per needle, 1 needle per point. So you can do a lot more Ren points to cover your overall treatment as well. Every single organ can be treated with this vessel and so much more. Your original chi can be treated. Your post-heaven chi can be treated. It can move energy out to the limbs. It can bring energy back to the organs. It's such a fantastic channel or vessel. And my favorite points at the moment are these 10. Now, again, I don't use these 10 all the time, but they're the ones that I typically use more often than others because of what I treat, which again is more likely to be emotion-based conditions, not so much musculoskeletal. I did my time with musculoskeletal. I still treat musculoskeletal patients, but less so than what I used to. Sports injuries, used to do heaps of that. This is what I target more now. This is what my patients come for. So this is the list of points that I feel do more. And for those of you that are interested, I consider that the best point on the body, and this will create conversation, is do 20. But look at the points. I mean, they do so much. Heart 7, Shen Men, it's the gate of the spirit, but it's also the yuan source point of the heart. The heart is the emperor organ. If the emperor is happy, all of its subjects are happy, as in all of the other organs and every other bit is happy. Stomach 36, spleen 6, what a big surprise. They do so much. They move energy back to the organs to make more vital substances, but they can move energy out to the extremities where necessary as well. So I don't think there's a heck of a lot of surprises there, but that's my current sort of list. All right, let's go to questions, and then we'll have a break in about 5-10 minutes, depending on how long this takes. So I'll need to see if there are actually questions. As I'm looking at that, perhaps you can help out here. When you do diagnostic stuff, let's work our way through. So let's just do one at a time. What's your typical diagnostic tool? Is it 5-element based? Is it Zhang Fu? Is it something different? Can you throw some stuff at me? Zhang Fu, 5 elements. What do I use gallbladder 20 for mostly? I'm not going to be able to go back to some of these. I feel like gallbladder 20 moves energy in and out of the head really well because it's on a channel that wraps so much around the head. So it treats basically any type of emotion. It treats every single sense organ. It will treat most headaches because of where the channel goes. But it's also a great de-stressor. It moves chi. Yeah, I just find it to be such an effective one for a lot of things. Both TCM and 5-element. Yep. Hara, 1 to 5 points old school. Dynamic pulses. Yeah, the pulses stuff has really been something that's come in interesting in the last few years in Australia. A lot of international people that are pulse experts are coming into Australia to offer some of that way of diagnosing. Quite interesting. Yeah, Kiko, Master Tung. Cool. Thank you. What's my other question here? Let's move that out of the way. What is your average number of points used then? Oh, yeah. 6 divisions. 5 to 10 points. Yeah, Dr. Tan, Master Tung. Look, they are very, very popular, and fair enough too, because they do get great results. I don't use it as much as perhaps I should, but again, when I teach it at colleges, it tends to be something that we encourage more as, I guess, musculoskeletal, which is probably a little bit unfair and narrow-minded. What we got? 14 points, 12, 5, 20, 6 to 10, anywhere from 8 up to 30. You guys are probably all seeing these. Yep. When I did a lot of musculoskeletal stuff, if they had, say, a neck problem and a low back problem, I did local neck, local low back, and then distal points for both. And that would often put me into high teens, early 20s. Yep. You add ear points, so that increases. Fair enough. Too many. Yeah. 10 points or less from points. Yeah, you got some of the ones that I like as well. Still in school, but I'm taught to use about 10. Yeah, and that would depend on your teachers as well. We had an acupuncturist that taught me and is still actually teaching now. And she encourages sort of no more than about 6 needles. So if you have her as a student, then that's what she encourages. So, yeah. Favorite channels, favorite points. What do you got for me? Yeah. Shen, circle, ear point, stomach channel. Yep. I think I definitely use too many needles. Thank you for your honesty. If you're getting good results, yeah. Gallbladder channel, spleen channel, yeah. Look, I mean, you could argue that there aren't really any bad channels, but some are used certainly a lot more than others. Loves the 8 extras. Yep. Alice uses the Sanjiao channel. Now, there is an interesting one. That is a very undervalued and underused channel. I love it. It's terrific. So much. For example, Sanjiao 8, Sun Yang Law, Sun 3 Yang Yang Law connector connects the Sanjiao, small intestine and large intestine channels, which means it treats all 3 channels, which means it treats everywhere those channels go. A lot of people aren't actually unaware of that. Maybe all of you knew that. Oh, my tummy's rumbling. Chong, spleen, gallbladder. Wow, quite a few choices there. Spleen 8. Maybe you do. Spleen 8's the she cleft point of the spleen. It treats dysmenorrhea and other things as well. Use very similar points to me so far. Gallbladder 34. Yep, terrific. Cool. Thank you. Scalp acupuncture. See, there's another thing that is not used a lot. I do like scalp acupuncture, but I tend to actually use actual points, even though I do teach scalp acupuncture at college. And of course, there's plenty of different systems on scalp acupuncture as well. Can't pick. Thank you. I love this. Thank you so much for sharing, because it gives me a good sense of what's going on with all of you as well. So bless you for taking the time. Sanjiao is definitely underused. Couldn't agree more. 0.0. There's a good one in the ear. Awesome resetter. Pericardium channel is another one that I think people tend to use that one, but I think people don't fully understand the value of the pericardium, and we will talk about that later on in this workshop. The thing that I like about the pericardium is that I actually prefer its Chinese name, which is Xin Bao, Xin, which means heart, Bao, which is embrace. So pericardium is called heart's embrace. So what is that doing? Well, what is the heart? The heart is the emperor organ. So the pericardium embraces it as a bodyguard. So it protects the heart. Obviously, if you have an emperor, sometimes there's going to be some baddies that come at you. So the pericardium is like the big bodyguard. Always picture him as being, and I do picture it as a him, big Samoan dude that just laughs at you if you try to come at the emperor. And I like using that example because the other thing that the heart's embrace or pericardium is it's the court jester. So it makes the heart happy, content, joyful. And a lot of big Samoan bodyguards and bouncers are incredibly funny people. And so they're like this perfect example in my mind of what the pericardium or heart's embrace is. They embrace as a bodyguard and they embrace as making the heart happy. So embrace the heart almost like giving them a big hug. All right, so use mostly ear acupuncture. Cool, yep. There's a question for Lotus, so you've probably seen that. Do you teach any scalp on Lotus? Jingwell points can be very effective. Yep. Thank you. All right, so what we might do then is we're at, well, not 4:20, it's 4:20 for me, so it must be 10:24 people in LA. So what we might do then is take a little break. Now, I don't know where Donna wants to do her little chat, so maybe Donna, if you're floating around, you can jump in and see. Are you going to do your little chat now or after a 10-minute break? Battlefield acupuncture. That's really interesting, some of that stuff that's coming in with ear. Definitely.
Hi, David. I'll do it after the break.
Sure. So then we'll go from 20 past to half past, or the next 10 minutes then?
Sounds good. See you guys back
Okay.
in 10 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you shortly.